Janet Jackson just dropped a bombshell that's got the entire music industry buzzing. In a raw and emotional moment, she pointed fingers not just at the people we've heard about for years, but directly at Jay-Z. She's not merely saying he was competing with Michael Jackson. She's hinting that he was working behind the scenes to box Michael out, set traps, and slowly isolate him from the power he held. The way Janet described it, she had to walk out of the room because it was too overwhelming. Yeah, it makes it clear this isn't some casual gossip. This is a sister talking about what she believes happened to her brother, and it could rewrite everything people thought they knew about Michael's final years. To understand just how deep this goes, you have to rewind to the moment everything shattered. June 25th, 2009. Michael Jackson is found unresponsive after being given propofol by his personal doctor, Conrad Murray. But before anyone calls for help, Murray reportedly makes a strange decision. His first call isn't to 911. It's to Fahim Muhammad, Diddy's bodyguard. And Fahim wasn't just any security guy. Industry whispers say he was the cleanup man, the person you called when something needed to quietly disappear. That one detail has haunted fans for years. Why would a fixer be the first person contacted in Michael's final moments? What was happening behind those closed doors that made that the priority? If you ask why anyone would want Michael out of the way, the answer isn't hard to find. Power. Michael wasn't just the king of pop. He was one of the most powerful figures in the music business. He owned the Sony ATV publishing catalog, a music empire worth hundreds of millions of dollars that gave him leverage over some of the biggest names in the industry. Producer Rodney Darkchild Jerkins once revealed that Michael confided in him, admitting he lived in fear because of that catalog. People thought his paranoia was just part of his eccentricity, but Janet says that catalog made him a target. Once you understand the weight of what Michael owned, everything else starts to look different. Legal battles, endless media scandals, sudden power shifts, they might not have been random storms. They could have been part of a bigger strategy to break his grip on the industry. The whispers get louder when you look back to 2001. That summer, Michael hit the stage at Summer Jam alongside Jay-Z, and insiders say it was a turning point. Jay started weaving himself deeper into Michael's orbit. But this story stretches even further back, to 1993, when LaToya Jackson's then-husband, Jack Gordon, allegedly began manipulating her to get closer to Michael. Gordon was accused of controlling LaToya, gaslighting her, and convincing her she needed protection from her own family. Shortly after, she shocked the world by publicly accusing Michael of paying off families, claims she later retracted, revealing Gordon had forced her to say them. By the time she tried to undo the damage, the headlines had already circled the globe. The timing of all this, Jay-Z's deeper ties to Michael, Diddy's growing influence, LaToya's coerced statements, starts to form a timeline that feels less like coincidence and more like calculated moves behind the curtain. That's when the names Jay-Z and Diddy keep surfacing. Insiders allege they had the motive, the reach, and the strategy to quietly destabilize Michael. Jaguar Wright once said, "Diddy was bad, but Jay-Z was worse." Back then, people dismissed it as gossip. Now it's being treated like a puzzle piece sliding into place. Michael and Prince were hit with scandal after scandal, curveballs that never seemed to stop, while Jay-Z and Diddy rose higher and higher, untouched. The media portrayed them as moguls lifting others up, but insiders whisper about a darker strategy. Neutralize the biggest threats while walking away spotless. When you compare the patterns, it's hard not to notice who kept getting targeted and who didn't. Michael wasn't silent about it either. He went public accusing Sony CEO Tommy Mottola of racism and dirty tactics. He warned that powerful figures were coming for him, and he refused to play by the rules. Around this time, Conrad Murray and Fahim Muhammad became central figures in his daily life. Janet remembers being kept away from her brother in those final weeks. Not by choice, but because she wasn't allowed near him. Even when Michael's health collapsed, his family wasn't alerted. Paris Jackson would later recall seeing her father crying, shivering, asking for warmth in his last days. while the family was locked out of his world. That kind of isolation doesn't happen by accident. It happens when the circle around someone tightens to the point where outsiders, especially family, are no longer able to intervene. The timing after Michael's death only made suspicions grow. 5 days after June 25th, Roc Nation announced a major distribution deal with Sony. For some, it looked like business as usual. For others, it looked like a power grab perfectly timed with Michael's fall. LaToya has said Michael warned her that people were plotting to take him, and that infiltrators had already slipped into his circle. Fahim Mohammed's arrival as Michael's head of security, just 10 months before his passing, suddenly doesn't seem random. It seems like a piece of a larger puzzle. Stack up the timeline, catalog ownership, isolation, media attacks, sudden business deals, and it stops feeling like a string of coincidences. It starts to look like a story written behind closed doors. Janet says Michael told his sisters he was being followed, and those warnings came again and again. It wasn't just the paranoia of a superstar, it was fear from someone who understood the stakes. He was surrounded, medicated, and cut off, unable to see how deep the trap had become. She openly blames Conrad Murray for administering the drugs that killed her brother, but hints that he might have been just a fall guy. LaToya goes even further, calling him a scapegoat in a larger setup. When you line up the family's accounts, the producer testimonies, and the business deals that followed, the picture that emerges is chilling. Isolation, control, image manipulation, and sudden shifts in power, all happening around one man who held more leverage than anyone else in the music world. Janet's revelations aren't just reviving old rumors, they're connecting dots people overlooked for years. When the same names keep popping up across different timelines and events, it's fair to ask whether this was a tragic series of coincidences or a deliberate strategy to take down a king. Whether you believe the theory or think it's too wild to be true, the pieces align just enough to make you think twice. Was Michael set up? Or are these just stories being reassembled with hindsight? Drop your thoughts in the comments, share this with someone who needs to hear it, and buckle up. Because if Janet's right, this might just be the beginning of the truth unraveling.